Hello and welcome back to our special coverage of the 4th year anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Today I'm joined by Howard Buffett, the son of Warren Buffett, and I think many would call the angel of Ukraine. Sir, thank you so much for joining us.
That's an exaggeration, but anyway, thank you.
Well, I don't think any single person has either directly or indirectly impacted so many lives in this country as you, and really I think anybody who's a friend of Ukraine would say that.
Well, thank you.
Let's start back 4 years ago when this horrible war broke out. How did you get started here, and how did your activities in Ukraine evolve to the extent that they have?
Well, our foundation is focused primarily, our two largest areas are conflict mitigation and food security. So immediately when the full-scale invasion occurred, it was clear that it was a conflict, and it was clear it would have a big impact on food security, being a country that, a lot of people would refer to it as the breadbasket of Europe, but the way I would have viewed it was a huge supplier and a critical supplier to food supplies for like the World Food Program and other emergency relief agencies. So I knew it would have an impact, and I felt like, I was in Ukraine in 1991 in January. It was still part of the Soviet Union. That's the extent of my experience. So I felt like I should get over here and start to understand the lay of the land. It took me a little bit. I got here in April, first week in April of 2022. And part of that delay was just we hadn't worked in Europe, we hadn't worked in Ukraine. We've spent our time in Africa and Central America, South America. So it took a little time to get here, but as soon as I got here and hit the ground, it was clear the scale of what was already occurring, and who could have imagined that 4 years later it would be where it's at. I certainly couldn't have imagined it.
That would have been about the same time of the liberation of Bucha. I'm sure that had a big impact.
Yeah. And I wish I could have gotten to Bucha at that time, but I didn't get there. I was still learning the ground. I was still trying to figure out who can we work with, who do we trust, who's going to be helpful. So I missed out on that part in terms of, which was, amazing, because everybody had predicted something very different. And Ukraine had obviously proved them wrong. So it was a pretty significant time, and it was a pretty amazing thing to not that I was there personally, but to just even watch it on a TV screen, to see what Ukraine was able to accomplish against Russia was just, it should have prepared people that we could be fighting 5 years later, 4 years later, going to the 5th year. I don't think it did. I don't think anybody expected it.
When did you realize that it was going to be a long war?
I think probably after the 2nd year, going into the 3rd year, when you started to see changes in external support. You saw some challenges militarily on the Ukraine side, and Putin it was very clear that he had no interest in doing anything other than carrying out everything that he said he wanted to do, which would really, in essence, be taking all of Ukraine, certainly replacing the current government in Kyiv with a Russian government, basically. It was just clear he was not going to stop.
Yeah, and he still is not going to stop.
He's not going to stop, no, until he has to.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to focus on some of the great things that you do here for our viewers to kind of get an understanding of this. You talked about food security, and you can kind of, I guess you can do two things at once. You can kill two birds with one stone, in that you can support Africa, where you were doing your activities earlier. But I've also been with some of the organizations that you support, and they give immense food aid to internally displaced persons.
And along the front line.
And along the front lines, yes. This is absolutely essential. It's been absolutely essential. What are some of the projects that you do here in Ukraine that have been surprising to you, that you normally...
Well, a lot of it's surprising because it's very different for us. We've worked in a lot of conflict areas, but most of those areas we've had the luxury of kind of working our way into it. So we've taken our time and we've tried to identify who do we want to work with, who's doing what in the territory. This is a war. You don't get that luxury. I mean, we had to immediately try to figure out who could we go to, who could we trust, who could deliver on large scale contributions from our side of it and have impact. And so that took a little bit of work, but we don't want to feed. We don't want to be funding an organization that is putting out 350,000 boxes of food a month along the front line, but it's absolutely necessary. There's kind of a magic line where on one side of it, to the east, you have no access to food, really. I mean, there's no markets, there's no, you can't today, in today's circumstances are much more difficult than a year ago in terms of drones. You can't even think about getting in a car and driving somewhere. I mean, you're in danger. It's a threat constantly. It never stops. So, if you're on the wrong side of that line and you just can't get food, you can't get water, you can't get hygiene products, the only answer is that you provide it. And so we are doing something we typically don't do, which is provide emergency food assistance. And what we prefer to do is to be the first organization in that will take risk on an idea. Whether it works or doesn't work, we're okay with that. We're the first person in to try to do something that maybe someone else won't try. We want to be the first person in or organization in that it's an innovative idea and we don't know if it'll work, but it's certainly worth trying. We're doing a lot of that in Ukraine, but when you're feeding people along the front line, you're just trying to help people survive. And it's a necessity. So, when you get into things like the war crime investigations and documentation, that's very different. Whether you can get prosecution or not, you have to document what's happened. I mean, almost 200,000 war crimes. And people don't think about it, but Putin is committing a war crime every single day in Ukraine. I mean, multiple war crimes and crimes against humanity. So it's a nonstop, onslaught of just attacking civilians and civilian targets. So that's not going to stop. But that's a very different thing because it is establishing the evidence to prove what Putin and the Russians have done against the Ukrainian population. Our agricultural programs, we have a number of those different programs. I think one of the things that having, I farm myself, so having spent time on a farm, it's really hard to see the farmers go through what they're going through and losing equipment, losing animals, losing land. I mean, taking away everything that they've spent their life building, probably generations of families building it. So, trying to keep those guys in business, trying to keep the harvest going, feeding Ukraine, feeding other countries, it's a critical component of what Ukraine is about. So there's various different things we're doing, but some of the big ones are agriculture, demining, investigation of war crimes, food security, those types of areas.
Yes, and the demining, I mean, this is one of the most mined countries in the world. How have you made some progress concerning that, giving the land back to the farmers so that they can grow food and have a living? Well,
there's kind of three categories of demining without getting technical about it, and they're all slow, but we've put together a little different way of approaching the lowest of the categories, if I put it, the easiest of the categories, where there could be mines there. They've done like what they would call a non-technical survey, determined that there's likely not mines there, but there's still a lot of farmers that can't risk both their lives but also their equipment, and so they want that to be verified. They want the confidence in it that they can go back in and farm it safely. So we have worked on some pretty progressive ideas on how to get that achieved, and that sticks with our focus on agriculture anyway. But there's hundreds of thousands of hectares that need to be confirmed or verified that they are safe to farm, and a lot of farmers will just take the chance. And you've seen what some of those consequences are. Sometimes you see you'll read about a farmer that's gotten killed. You'll read about farm equipment that's been blown up. Somebody survived, but I think Ukraine, they say Ukraine is the most mined country in the world today, and I think it probably is. I mean, I don't know that anybody knows for sure, but it's going to take a lot to get this country back to where it needs to be, and we want to play a part and a role in helping farmers get back into the field.
The United States has, well, it's made some mistakes in the beginning, and it's probably making some very big mistakes now. We used to be the moral compass in the world, and now I don't know which way it's going. You've seen a lot in your lifetime. What are your thoughts about what the U.S. is doing right now and its policy towards Vladimir Putin and Russia and this whole piece?
Well, I find it incredibly disappointing, and disappointing isn't a strong enough way to put it. But I think, I go back, and over a 4-year period of time, people forget things. The narrative changes, the focus changes, the dynamics change. The very first big mistake that was made in the United States is I've lived through about 5 different conflicts, Vietnam being the first one in my lifetime, in Iraq and Afghanistan. And at no time has the United States engaged in a conflict of any serious consequence without the U.S. president going on TV and explaining to the American people why it's important for us to make a commitment to this conflict, why it's important for us to be engaged, what are the consequences if we don't engage. That was not done. That, to me, that was the largest single biggest mistake at the beginning of the war, because the American people didn't understand why. I think they had a gut feeling. They knew right from wrong. They knew that Russia was the aggressor. They knew that Russia shouldn't be invading a sovereign country. So I think their gut feeling was very clear that we should support Ukraine. I don't think that was the problem. I think the problem is that you still have to go on and explain to the population of the country whose tax money you're using why you're doing it. That was never done, and now, unfortunately, you're getting almost the opposite narrative. So we missed the opportunity in the beginning to set the record straight. There was not nearly enough effort from that point on, and certainly not now, to try to counter the propaganda that Russia pumps into the United States, and people don't even understand what's happening. They don't see it, they don't understand it, and then you have senior politicians who are repeating the propaganda. So, to me, it's amazing that you still have a huge majority of the American public who support Ukraine. And they're supporting it against all odds, if you want to think about it. They're supporting it against an administration that is not supporting Ukraine, really. And they're supporting it against the propaganda that Russia is putting into our country every single day. And they're supporting it against activists who, for whatever agenda, because there can be different agendas, are working against people understanding why we should support Ukraine. So the fact that you have the majority of Americans, the far majority of Americans, to still support Ukraine is pretty impressive in the sense that it's clear what's right and it's clear what's wrong. And the American public still sees that against all of that backdrop.
Is this an opportunity for Europe to step in and fill the void that America is unfortunately?
I think it's more than an opportunity. I think actually what Europe could have done, it's not my business to tell Europe what to do, but as an observer, I could easily see where Europe has missed this opportunity to just stand up and say, we're going to do the right thing. We're going to apply the resources that it takes. We're going to have the guts to do it. We're going to take the risk to do it, whatever it is. And we can't wait for the United States. And we can't stand by while Putin and his Russian military destroy civilian targets and attack a country that is a sovereign country that believes in freedom and democracy, and they're doing everything in the world to defend it. And how do you stand by and not help them defend themselves? And Europe has this opportunity to stand up and say, the United States, you can do whatever you want. Any other country can do what they want, but as a unified European group of countries, we are going to stand up and do the right thing and do what we need to do. They've not done that either. There has been, through the entire process, including the United States starting in 2022, everything has been a piecemeal parts of things here, parts of things there, but there hasn't been the strategy and commitment to defeat Russia. So Biden's narrative was always, we stand with you as long as we need to. That's the wrong narrative. The narrative should have immediately been, we will help you defeat Russia. That should have been the narrative. And it needs to be the narrative today. And anybody who doesn't think that Ukraine cannot beat Russia, even now after 4 years, is missing what's happened the last 4 years. They're not seeing it, they're not understanding it, and they're not realizing that even though Ukraine may, have challenges in certain places along the front line or whatever it is, this war is not over. And I spoke with some younger and older. I mean, the youngest was 23 and the oldest was 61, I think. Soldiers getting trained, volunteers today up at a training area. And, their answer is, we have to protect our country. I mean, we can't abandon what we stand for. We can't abandon our families. We can't abandon our freedom. We can't abandon our democracy. We have no option but to fight. And that's a courage that comes from, I think, a place that you don't know if you have it until you face it. And Ukraine has proven that they have it.
Well, I hope we don't have another one of these anniversaries, but it's looking increasingly likely that we will. Howard Buffett, I appreciate your thoughts on this matter, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And that concludes this discussion here. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.